Dr. DeSalvo this morning talked about the fact that ONC is 10 years old, coming up in April of this year, and we've got another big 10 years ahead of us here, and we're going to need all of you and all of your help to get our work done. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Acting United States Surgeon General, Rear Admiral Boris Lushniak. Dr. Lushniak is a physician who holds a master's in public health. He is responsible for articulating the best available scientific information to the public regarding ways to improve personal health and the health of the nation. He is a firm believer in leadership by example. And Rear Admiral Lushniak also promotes the core messages of the National Prevention Strategy via his own active lifestyle. You'll be happy to hear he is an avid long-distance bicyclist, runner, and hiker. And in 2013, he scaled the summit of the most heavily glaciated peak in the United States, Washington's 14,000-foot Mount Rainier. He also leads community Surgeon General's walks throughout the United States. So please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. I'm not a podium guy, so I'm actually going to walk around a little bit. You know, I always think when I hear that story about that most heavily glaciated peak, and you think of the dangers of mountaineering, going up to the mountains, not knowing what's going to hit you, not knowing whether that little piece of snow is actually going to withstand your weight, whether you're going to fall through, that in fact it's nothing compared to the usual politics that go on within Washington, D.C., and the dangers inherent in the job of being the acting Surgeon General. But it is my pleasure to be here today. Why? Because we need you. We really need you. So we're in the 21st century. And as you heard, one of the jobs of the Surgeon General of the United States is to do what? It's to take the best science, to be able to translate it, to be able to communicate it with our population, so that at the end of the day, what does it have? That it has an effect, that it has the ability to improve our population's health and safety. And since we're now in the 21st century with all these brand new tools, and tools that all of you, right, the common bond, although out there I realize there's feds, there's non-feds, there's the partners that all work together, but the common bond is the words of health and information technology, which is using those incredible tools that have been developed, using this new language. What can we do to better our nation's health? So we're actually going beyond the concepts. Now, I realize you are going through a metamorphosis, right? Maybe is the easy stuff over? Maybe it is, or it's certainly undergoing improvement. Electronic health record, right? That's almost now so 20th century. Conceptually, there has to be more improvements. It's got to be easier. On a personal basis, my wife, who's a physician, works as a volunteer helping underserved and vulnerable populations in Montgomery County, Maryland. 3 weeks ago, comes home and says what to me? Oh my God, I went to work today, the paper record is no longer there, and they gave me this new electronic health record to do. I couldn't even do it. I had to have another person there with me to assist. And yet, at the end of all this, what happened? 3 weeks later, she says, I'm finally getting it. It's working. Let me read you a quote that's probably been in your circles for a while, but I want you to understand that what you in the IT world are now working on, provided at the end of the day we take the right approach, it will change the world of health in this country. It's from the 1800s. That it will ever come into general use, notwithstanding its value, is extremely doubtful. Because its beneficial application requires much time and gives a good bit of trouble, both to the patient and the practitioner. Because its hue and character are foreign and opposed to all our habits and associations. London Times, 1834, describing the stethoscope. So in reality, what we're doing is we're redeveloping the stethoscope to sometimes my other community, the medical community, a skeptical community, to sometimes a skeptical community in the patients we are trying to treat. But what do we know? We know that in this endeavor, part of the mission of my uniform service, the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service, which becomes, in essence, all of our missions. It's not just party to one uniform service. It's everyone who works in the health environment. And what I want to do is deputize you all that in the work you're doing in health information technology, you have to believe in this, that our mission is to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of our nation. That although you may be disconnected in many of your duties from that patient, but if you're working in health IT, ultimately it comes down to that. That's what we're trying to do. Yes, we're trying to do it more efficiently. Yes, we're trying to do it economically. Yes, we're trying to take the Affordable Care Act and make sure that it saves our nation its precious monetary resources. But our mission is bold and noble. It's to affect those individuals. It's to make their lives better. So where do I see all this going? Well, certainly the Office of the Surgeon General, again, we're there to make sure that information gets out there. I have to realize as a 21st century mentality that the tools are different than the 20th century. They're different than the 18th or 19th centuries. And we have the capability of what? Of to personalize that concept. You have the tools that contain huge amounts of information. And yet we have to make that information accessible. We have to make sure that that individual is able to use that information for their benefit. Health records, that they have access to them, that they can then share it with needed individuals. Share it with their family members, share it with their healthcare providers, share it across the imminent borders that exist out there. We have to take that information for the good of that patient, because that's the bottom line. It's the good of that patient. We take it from that level and say, what do we create? What do we do using this incredible source of information that exists out there? It's the personalization of that, of not just the record keeping, but in essence, it's the personalization of how I impact and we can impact society. This past Friday, we released, in honor of the 50th anniversary of the first Surgeon General's report on smoking. 1964, Surgeon General Luther Terry released a report that had a very simple conclusion. The conclusion said what? Said cigarette smoking is a health hazard of importance to the United States that warrants appropriate remedial action. How government ease? How so 60s? But in fact, that one simple statement took us on the pathway of activity. Now what I'm saying is 50 years later, as we released the report at the White House this past Friday, what do we say? We say, job well done over 50 years. But it's not over. 18% of the population still smokes today. That results in 480,000 deaths every year from smoking-related diseases. Current trends continue. 5.6 million kids under the age of 18 who are alive today. Line them up, 13 kids, one of those 13 will die from smoking-related diseases unless I do something. This is a mission. It's the ability for us to say, can we do what we're trying to achieve? Healthy People 2020, one of the goals of that is to decrease the smoking rate from 18%, where it's at now, to 12% in the next 6 years. Doable? I don't know. Another objective, 10% in 10 years. Another objective, a tobacco-free generation in a generation. We can line up against multiple of these flags, but what I realize is, how do I use the tools you're developing? How do I use the important applications you are working on, not just to be able to say we have incredible health records, not to say that we're coming up with a scheme of monitoring so we adequately reimburse people. That's part of it, folks. What I'm telling you from the Office of Surgeon General, ultimately I'm looking at that individual. What I'm relying on you and your community to do in these next few years is assist me in these incredible public health missions ahead of us. Are there applications to assist that person? We know part of the formula, part of the answer is what? Smoking cessation programs and counseling. Costly, uses up resources, but I'm sure we have the technology to actually be able to do that in a personalized fashion, whether it's through telehealth, whether it's through apps on one's smartphone, whether it's that connectivity of communicating on a daily basis. We have the ability to touch that person and to say to that 18 or 17 or 16-year-old, do you want to be one of those 13? Or is there something in your language that I can speak to you and touch you with this? We enter an age, too, of where I have concerns about disparities. And certainly in the world of information technology, we have to be aware of that. The traditional generation, the concept of the greatest generation, is treated differently than the baby boomers of my generation, needs to be treated differently than Generation X or the millennials. I've heard it once said in a very sort of interesting way that when it comes to technology, my generation, the baby boomers, it is in fact what? It's a second language to me, technology. Right? I grew up with the concept at work of a wang with huge disks that held information. We know, for example, that the computers that put us into the mission, the 10-year mission of putting man on the moon, don't even exist today because there's no need for them. They were so lackadaisical in their approaches. That's the generation I'm from. You need to speak to me differently because I've learned technology as a second language. Well, my kids, the millennials, it's their native tongue. They speak it fluently. So using everything you're working on, using those approaches, realize one of the things I'll direct you towards is look up the National Prevention Strategy, concept that's embedded within the Affordable Care Act that points towards a vision, and that vision is most of the diseases in our country are preventable. If preventable, what are my tools that exist within that strategy? How do I deal with the smoking issue? How do I deal with the obesity issue? How do I deal with the idea of alcohol abuse, substance abuse? How do I deal with making my people fit? Cardiovascular diseases, the Million Hearts campaign, simple things of aspirin, blood pressure control, cholesterol control, and smoking cessation. Those ABCs can lead to 1 million lives saved by 2017. But it doesn't happen the old-fashioned way, folks. It doesn't happen with the Surgeon General coming up and saying, listen, people, I think this is really important, and, you know, listen to me. No. 21st century means the Surgeon General can speak out. But 21st century is what? Is that the Surgeon General embraces the health IT community to join in that battle to fight those diseases. And this may be a little different than you've heard at this meeting before. Maybe. But I want to put you on that tack that think about the bold and noble cause that health IT can play in all this. Can we touch those individuals? Out of the Surgeon General's office, we have a family history initiative. It's a small little project, but one that has its repercussions. Every Thanksgiving, Surgeon General will come up with a statement saying, as you're sitting around the table with your family, as you're eating the turkey, as you're being thankful for all the blessings on your family and our nation, that's the time to talk about medical conditions in the family. It's not a Debbie Downer. It, in fact, is something that is the ability to take place when we have those generations. We have that tool now where people can go to the internet, put on that information. It can talk with Microsoft's Health Vault. It can go on to other things. This is but an example of the ability of that information to be out there. the tools that we have. I mentioned personalizing things. How do we get to that person with diabetes and remind them what to do, what to eat? How do we touch them in that fashion? Last week I was listening to the radio, heard a great new innovation, not sure who heard this story, National Public Radio, of the contact lens that has embedded within it information gathering tools, embedded in the contact lens that takes the glucose levels of that person. This is a contact lens. This is the future, folks. But it's that personalized level that I need to be able to solve our problems. Even the world of, let's call it the fun stuff, gaming. How do we introduce the concept of gaming so people learn about their health, so they learn about what's good for them and what's wrong for them? It's very important that at the end of the day, it's not a guy in a uniform telling someone, don't smoke, it's bad for you. Eat this, that's good for you. Go take a walk, right? Don't sit on the couch. That doesn't work. What works is the concept of using those health IT tools. How do we empower individuals? It's an important word, empowering individuals. By doing what? By making sure they have all this information in the information world. They have all of it. And at the end of it, they actually make the right decision. Help me get that information to our people. Help me have that impact on our nation. With smoking, 480,000 deaths. Since 1964, 20 million people have died. If it continues, 5.6 million kids now living. Impact on our nation, $289 billion of direct and indirect costs, all from this. Help me by developing those tools, by looking at the world from your perspective. Help me with this. We can create that tobacco-free generation. It won't happen from me alone. It won't happen from scientists, the public health community. It's going to be that proverbial village that works on this issue. One issue, and I can list many. But at the end of the day, I have to make sure that you are embedded in that community, that you take your leadership roles, that using the intelligence, using the tools that you have, using your abilities and pointing them into that direction of health, we, ladies and gentlemen, can achieve great things. President Kennedy said, man on the moon in a decade. Acting Surgeon General says, tobacco-free generation in a generation. Help me. Thank you.